Okay, Friday Flow, here we go. Had a very interesting experience last night where I found myself consciously repeating a pattern that, in my own understanding, is from earlier on in life. It's a wild experience to catch yourself repeating a pattern. It really is, because it's kind of like you might be asleep, right? And I mean this metaphorically, I don't mean this literally. When I say asleep, I'm referring to autopilot, right? Which is a majority of the way that we live life in our waking state. Which, in other words, if you want to say it this way, it's basically being asleep because you're just unconsciously, thinking, feeling, and acting. That's all that it is. But yeah, I was having a conversation with my girlfriend, and it was very interesting because I really looked at the material of the conversation. I looked at the emotions, the thought processes, and everything, and what I noticed was a dynamic of familiarity. And I was like, everything that I'm thinking, feeling, and saying is familiar to earlier on in life. In a time when I have felt, I guess I could say the word is helpless. I have, I've experienced a lot of things in life that have led me to feel helpless. And one of the things is the consuming of the news on the television, vicariously living through the tragedy that happens around the world, right? And it's just fascinating because that in and of itself is something that I have experienced many times throughout my life as a result of just like watching the news. I would argue that it's not a healthy thing to do. The news has a tendency to kind of like place you in this position of like, hey, there's all this terrible shit happening over here and you can't do anything about it, you know? Well, it's not true that you can't do anything about it, like you can join, like activism groups and all that stuff. You can protest, you can try to enact change on the world. However, this goes full circle. Here's another thing. You can also bring all of yourself, your focus, awareness, and energy back to yourself and into your body, and you can do the work to inner engineer your reality, right? I like that word, inner engineering. And you can try to manipulate the outside world all you want. You can. Or you can bring yourself back to you and stop tuning into these external entities that make you live, I don't want to say make you live, influence you to live vicariously through these other means. And so what I found was that it's like, okay, I'm repeating a pattern right now. These thoughts, these feelings, this behavior, it's all familiar to earlier on in my life. I'm just really excited that I caught myself repeating a pattern, because that in and of itself is one of those moments where it's kind of like, when like you're taken by your mind, right? You're taken back to the past or like into the future. You can tell when somebody's not present. Their eyes usually do something, right? They kind of just like, they look off into the distance and then they're gone, they're not there. These moments of becoming aware of pattern repetition, right? In other words, this is also repetition compulsion. What it is that a person is familiar with has a pull on them. It has an influence. It's kind of like, hey, that bubble bath you've been taking for a long time? Very comfortable and familiar. Very warm, very nice, right? It's very enticing. Yeah, come back here and hop back in. Whatever it is you're trying to do out there. Repetition compulsion is compulsively pulling your phone out of your pocket because it's what you're used to. Repetition compulsion is turning on the news because it's what you're used to. Repetition compulsion is speeding in your car excessively because it's what you're used to. Repetition compulsion is getting frustrated in traffic because it's what you learned and what it is that you're used to. So repetition compulsion is exactly what I was enacting out, and just looking at the energy dynamic. Oh, I wish things could be different. Oh, I wish things could be different. Oh, I wish they weren't the way that they are. Why do they have to be the way that they are? It's not okay that it's not okay that they are the way that they are. Something has to change. That has to change. That external piece of this massive puzzle has to change. It's not okay. That's not okay with me. Low energy, right? And what's wild is that when a person takes their focus, awareness, and energy back to themselves and into their body, and they actually they pivot, right? It's kind of like here's the wild thing. When a person is so focused on the outside world, right? Which I've been here. A majority of my life has been very focused on trying to manipulate and change the outside world for me to feel better, right? I was looking out there, being like, oh, that's got to change. Oh, that's got to change. Oh, that's got to change. None of this is okay. It's got to change. And I won't feel okay unless it changes or until it changes, right? But then, when you pivot and you turn around and you look at yourself and you realize what you're doing, right? It's not right or wrong or good or bad. Potentially is a matter of healthy or unhealthy. But it's kind of like, when you see it for what it is, it becomes counterproductive. It's like, why am I doing that? Right? And then you kind of, whoa, you wake up again, right? Repetition compulsion is falling back asleep. Seeing yourself and what's actually happening is waking up. And again, this is a matter of metaphorical. I'm not talking about... I'm talking about actual pattern repetition. When you are repeating a pattern and you are unaware that you are repeating a pattern, you are metaphorically asleep. And so I found myself doing this last night. One of the coolest things that I've noticed about my journey of healing is the amount of times where I've been in situations with people and either I've said to myself or out loud, why am I doing this? What am I doing here in this situation? Or out loud with the other person, why are we doing this? What is the point of this right now? And the other people are probably, by the way, I do not at all claim myself to be superior to anybody. I just really, really enjoy challenging social situations. When I say that, I don't mean I enjoy challenging, like, difficult social situations. I mean that I enjoy, like, the act of challenging a social situation. Like, kind of like looking at it and being like, why are we talking about this? And then going deeper into that. Because there is so much to learn. There's so much fabric. There is likely pattern repetition. There is likely repetition compulsion. The amount of times that we do things just because we're used to them and familiar, not that we actually want to. The amount of things in life that we do because it's just comfortable and familiar, and it comes from that aspect of family of origin. There's a dynamic. For instance, I'll put this into... I'll use an example for this. I have never... Any time that I have ever raised my voice, I've never enjoyed doing it. But as a result of repeating a pattern and familiarity and comfort and what I've learned when I was younger, in terms of, if you want to be heard, you need to be loud, right? It's not true at all. I mean, yeah, if somebody's raising their voice with you and they're talking over you, it's going to be challenging for you to get anything in at all. But you're not going to be heard by being loud. Sometimes you're just not going to be heard at all, and you need to walk away from the situation because the person is just not going to be able to have a conversation with you. But it's really all about just like recognizing familiar dynamics. Repeating patterns and repeating patterns and repetition compulsion is all about familiarity, right? The way that I get out of my car when I get out of my car is familiar. I could deviate and like turn around and like get out the other way, and that might change something. I don't know. I could change the way that I go about ending this video, and that would challenge repetition compulsion, and repeating a pattern. It would, because it would change the dynamics of how I approach it. That in and of itself is awareness. That is conscious awareness, and that has the capacity to, depending on, the level of it, mildly or drastically change the dynamics of everything. It's wild. It's really cool to be in the moment and really look at what is going on. The book Awareness by Anthony DeMello is all about this. It's all about being aware of yourself. The patterns of the mind, right? Why do we do what we do? Oh, it's a familiar feeling. Yeah, it's a familiar feeling. And so I actually, last night in the situation with my girlfriend, I stopped the conversation for a second, and I was like, wait a second, I'm repeating a pattern. This is familiar from childhood. This is a familiar feeling of helplessness. This is a familiar feeling of it's my responsibility to change whatever's going on out there or over there, but I can't do it, and because of that, I'm just living vicariously through this information that I'm receiving through this broadcasting system, and I feel fucking helpless. And because of that, I'm pissed. And because of that, I think that whatever the fuck is happening is stupid. And because of that, I think, why are humans so underdeveloped sometimes? Why do we have to do the low energy things that we do? And it just takes me further and further and further and further and further away from myself, which, by the way, is a detriment, because I would argue, so the very reason why I'm having a reaction to the situation is because I recognize things within myself that I do not like. Which is, of course, why I project, which is, of course, why I displace. Anything that I see out there that I don't like is usually a reflection of how I feel about myself, my own insecurities, inadequacies, imperfections, all of the bullshit. But again, at the end of the day, I'm human, right? But I would argue that the most important thing that I can do here is to become aware of patterns that I'm repeating. Because the compulsion comes to an end when the light of awareness is shined on it.